trafficking is very different than consent, and then it's how do we clearly define what's what so that we can tackle the problem and not the non-problem in
Totally.
my mind, you know?
Totally.
Hmm.
Yeah. That's a great way to steer this because at the end of the day, as we've just discussed, there's going to be areas where we just agree to disagree on a very, very basic level. But that's not
Hmm.
to say that there are a lot of issues for us to address that we can address that are important to address and really significantly move the needle on. And that's where, like I said before, that we as Access Cry put all of our attention and energy is on those specific tangible things that we can do to make a difference in a significant way. So I think when it comes to the public health crisis, what I would describe as the public health crisis as a result of widespread childhood exposure to pornography, I think there's, a handful of things there to be considered. We've talked about the age verification walls in place, but also just the need for better sexual education,
Hmm.
because the reality is that the the publication of this content has created a world in which, well, okay, so what we know now about neurology, about neural coupling, about mirror neurons, about the way that we experience images in such a visceral, real, and personal way by
Hmm.
by creating and publishing pornographic content that now is distributed around the world because the world's been hardwired with the internet. We live in an environment that is essentially a global orgy in which everyone is invited to it, and including children. And the impact that has an impact on our psyche as a society, and I believe has resulted in the corporate sexual traumatization of our planet. And so when we talk about the socializing aspects of that, if I'm living in that environment as my kind of the wallpaper of my life, then what impact does it have on the ideas, values, worldview, identity that I shape as an individual? As I'm taking in those images and those stories, how do I internalize that in the construction of my identity, worldview, values? What we are seeing is a generation who is developing some very distorted ideas about themselves and about sexuality and about women as a result of that. And so I don't think it's healthy for us as a society to uh, to consume pornography as the primary form of our sexual education. And I think that a huge part of what we need to do to address that is to start having more age appropriate, aside from the age verification thing and trying to minimize the amount of childhood exposure to pornography, is having more age appropriate conversations with kids
Hmm.
growing up in this world about not like if, but when you're exposed to this, develop some critical thinking, develop the ability to deconstruct some of these images. Obviously, you're somebody who's in the porn industry, but even you have, clearly, I shouldn't say even you, but you as,
No, it's
you
fine.
know,
Yeah.
as a caring human have misgivings about certain genres of pornography that I'm sure, that you don't want to see. And so how do we work with children and do a better job of educating our kids in age appropriate ways about things that they're going to see, so that they're able to have a framework to even
Hmm.
interpret what they're seeing and deconstruct what they're seeing and understand, like, this is very unhealthy. This is not something that you want to integrate as part of your sexuality. So I think that's a huge factor in this,
Hmm.
as we consider just kind of the public health side of this, is the recognition that we are in a world in which these images are out there. We need to do a better job of protecting children from being exposed to it, but we also need to do a better job of having conversations with kids about this. We do have a very puritanical past in which even a conversation about sex is taboo.
Right.
And I can tell you, as a religious person, that is not helpful. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we absolutely need to resurrect a value for sex that takes the shame away and
Mm-hmm.
puts it in a context in which it has meaning, purpose, value, and we can have a healthy conversation about, this is something that you want to, that you don't want to be taken for a ride in this
Mm-hmm.
area of your life. Just
Mm-hmm.
because you saw this doesn't mean that your girlfriend is going to want that,
Mm-hmm.
and from a lot of research that I've done, that is part of what happens. That these young boys, grow up watching girls get choked and a bunch of other things, and think this is what girls want, and they jump to that and bypass all these normal social boundaries to get them to do something which the girl, depending on her makeup, um, may end up going along with, but experiencing as violating and be like, what the hell just happened to me? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's a huge factor is just having more age appropriate conversations with kids is in our current modern day civilized society.
No, I totally agree. And again, I look at porn as entertainment. I 100% think it's a terrible idea as an educational tool. It does not serve that purpose whatsoever for children or adults. Strictly entertainment, right? You're not going to drive down the road like Jason Bourne. Terrible idea. Like this is for entertainment only, and responsible entertainment. And I think a lot of the problem does stem from that relationship that we have with shame and sex. And that's for anyone of any walk, right? You don't have to be religious to have that I don't know, like that aversion to that conversation. It's going to be awkward no matter what, but the consequences are pretty grave if you decide to ditch that, right? And let your kid figure it out on their own, or live in this world where you think that they're just never going to stumble upon it, or their friends never going to share something. That is going to 100% happen. So I think it's so important to be ahead of that. You want to be ahead of their 8-year-old friend, 10-year-old friend, whatever that has access on their cell phone. You, even if you don't give your kid a phone, right, someone else's parent gave them a phone, so they're always going to have access to the internet one way or another. So again, age appropriate conversations, not pretending it doesn't exist, not pretending that they're going to be pure forever and never see the evils of the world or adult material or whatever, you know what I mean, just being
Exactly.
realistic about it.
Yep.